My adoptive parents only brought me in to serve as their son's personal lackey while turning a blind eye to how violent he was toward me. So I exposed their darkest secret and flipped the script in the most devastating way I could. I was 12 when I finally got adopted. My new parents hugged me tight and promised I'd never have to suffer again, and I believed them until I met their biological son, Mason. We were the same age, same grade, even looked eerily alike. But in my second week living with the Whitakers, Mason came home and beat the daylights out of me, all because he got a bad grade at school. I didn't want to seem like a snitch, so instead of telling anyone, I just limped around and moved slowly, making it clear I was in pain. We were sitting at the kitchen table when they finally noticed. "Nolan, what happened to you?" Before I could speak, Mason answered with a smirk. "Oh, that was all me," he said casually. "Got another damn C in math." My mom reached across the table and gently grabbed my hand. "Mason has severe academic anxiety that causes physical outbursts," she said softly. "The last foster kid couldn't handle it. We had to send him back after Mason broke his arm. But you're different," Dad added, quickly. "You're tougher. We saw it in your file. All those homes you made it through. You can handle this." Well, if foster care had taught me anything, it was how to survive, and that you have to speak up for yourself. "I'm not really okay with being hit," I said plainly. "Nolan," Dad cut in sharply, "do you remember the situation we rescued you from? Where your innocence was taken from you night after night and nobody cared? It would be a shame if we had to send you back there," my mom added, almost sweetly. That was the moment everything clicked. I wasn't their son. I was Mason's emotional punching bag with a social security number. The only place I felt even remotely like myself was school. Strangely enough, I was really good at it. Straight A's came easy. Teachers adored me. And I knew if the Whitakers found out, they'd twist it into something awful. So I let them believe I was flunking, just like their pathetic golden boy. One afternoon, I was in my room working on an essay when my mom barged in. "Guess what?" she beamed. "We just got your report card. Congratulations." She kissed my forehead and I froze, bracing for whatever came next. "We had no idea you were so smart. Mason got straight F's." "Do you want me to tutor him?" I asked. "No," she said sharply, then softened her voice. "Not exactly. You two look so much alike. I think it's best if you just start taking his tests. He can take yours. Just switch names." I wanted to scream "no" in her face. But then I thought about the group homes. Older kids stealing my food, my body being violated at 6, sleeping light every night. Even being Mason's homework mule was better than that. So I caved. "Of course, I'm in," I said cheerfully. She left, taking my report card with her. The system went into effect immediately. Monday morning, 3rd period, I walked into Mason's math class. He took my place in mine. The teacher barely glanced up as I scribbled Mason Whitaker on the exam. 90 minutes later, I had aced it. Meanwhile, Mason was tanking my tests on purpose, doodling lewd pictures in the margins of Nolan's work. Even as his grades skyrocketed, the abuse never stopped. He just got more precise. He'd hit me in spots where the bruises wouldn't show, said it was targeted anger control. The Whitakers rewarded him with a brand new car. I got a monthly bus pass. The worst part? Watching teachers praise him for what I did. Mrs. Chandler pulled him aside after I wrote a flawless essay on To Kill a Mockingbird, under his name. "This is beautifully written, Mason," she gushed. "You ever thought about joining the literary magazine?" He laughed right in her face. "Reading is for losers." She thought he was just being humble.
Not an F, just a C minus. But my petty little rebellion didn't last long. The day report cards came out, my dad yanked me out of bed at 3 a.m. What he did next was something I hadn't experienced since my worst days in foster care. When I finally gasped out that I'd never do it again, he patted my drenched head like I was a mutt that had finally learned not to pee on the rug. "Good boy," he said. "Now go make Mason breakfast. He's got a big test today." That was the moment I stopped being angry and started being strategic. They had shown me exactly who they were. Monsters willing to torture a child to protect their golden boy. And monsters always slip up eventually. I stood at the stove, making Mason's eggs the exact way he liked, sunny side up, crispy edges, while my brain replayed every bruise and injury still fresh on my body. The ones from last night ached under my shirt. I'd have to document them later. But right now, I had to play the role. The perfect foster kid. My hands moved on autopilot, buttering the toast evenly, arranging the plate exactly the way Mason liked it. The breakfast table felt like a war zone that morning. Mrs. Whitaker sat across from me with her coffee, casually scrolling through her phone, that plastered Stepford smile never leaving her face. Then, suddenly, her eyes lit up. "Oh, Nolan, I almost forgot," she said brightly. "Mason's SAT is next month." She stirred her coffee like she was commenting on the weather. "A friend of mine works at the testing center. She's very understanding of Mason's special needs." My stomach sank. Taking his regular class tests was bad enough, but the SAT? That was federal fraud. Real, prison-level fraud. I kept my face steady and nodded slightly, focusing on slicing into my eggs. Mason reached for the coffee pot and deliberately knocked it toward me. The scalding liquid splashed across my hand. I bit hard into my tongue, refusing to flinch, refusing to give him the satisfaction of watching me break. Mason narrowed his eyes at my lack of reaction. "Careful there, foster boy," he muttered. But I saw it, the flicker of recognition. Something was different in me since that brutal 3 a.m. wake-up, and he could sense it. At school, I kept my head low and glided through the hallways like a ghost. My hand throbbed from the burn, but there was no way I could go to the nurse. Too many questions. I slipped into English class just as the bell rang. "Nolan, can I speak with you for a moment?" Miss Chandler called from her desk. My heart pounded as I walked over. She waited until the class settled before lowering her voice. "I've noticed some bruises on your arms, and you've been moving stiffly lately." Her warm brown eyes searched mine, full of quiet concern. "Is everything okay at home?" The truth wanted to leap out of my throat. But then I thought of the Whitakers, how everyone adored them, how much money they funneled into the school, how perfect they looked from the outside. Who would believe me? "Just been playing basketball at the park," I lied smoothly. "Got a little too into it." She didn't look convinced, but gave a slow nod. "My door is always open, okay?" At lunch, I sat alone in my usual spot, pushing my sandwich around the tray. Mason held court at the popular table, surrounded by his friends. His voice carried across the cafeteria like a trumpet. "Yeah, my grandparents set up this college trust fund. Only kicks in if I get into a top school. Good thing I turned my grades around, right? Harvard, here I come." His friends laughed and hyped him up. One asked how he pulled off the miracle transformation. "Just stop being lazy," Mason said with a smug grin. "Turns out I'm a genius when I apply myself." My sandwich turned to dust in my mouth. They weren't just using me to get Mason through high school. This was long-term. His trust fund, his college plans, maybe even his career. How many years would I be trapped like this? After school, I dragged myself up to my room, worn out from the performance I had to keep up all day. But as soon as I opened the door, something felt off. My dresser drawers were ajar. Papers on my desk looked shuffled. The faint scent of Mrs. Whitaker's perfume hung in the air. My journal. I dropped my backpack and lunged for the mattress. Pulled up the corner. Gone. Panic exploded in my chest. I tore through the room, checking every hiding place, but it was gone. That journal held everything. My records of Mason's abuse, the test-swapping scam, dates, details, even teacher names. Without thinking, I stormed downstairs to the kitchen. Mrs. Whitaker stood at the counter, calmly chopping
vegetables for dinner. The knife moved in clean, deliberate strokes. "Where is it?" I demanded. She didn't look up. "Where is what, dear?" "My journal. You took it." The knife froze mid-chop. Then she slowly turned to face me, still gripping it, the blade catching the kitchen light like a warning. "Privacy is earned, not given, Nolan." Her voice was syrupy sweet, but her hand clenched the knife tighter than necessary, bringing it down hard on a carrot with a sharp crack. "We're a family. Families don't keep secrets." I stared at the blade, at the pleasant smile on her face while she held it. Message received. That night, I found my journal back on my bed. Several pages had been ripped out. The jagged edges screamed at me. Mason's fingerprints were smeared across the torn remains, intentional, mocking. Every entry about the abuse, every record of their manipulation, was gone. At dinner, Mr. Whitaker made an announcement while carving into his steak. "We've decided to upgrade the home security," he said casually. "Cameras throughout the house, for everyone's safety, of course." "Where exactly?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Oh, you know, common areas, hallways, exits, that sort of thing." He smiled over his fork. "We'll have monitors in our bedroom so we can keep an eye on everything." They were closing every exit, watching every move. Even my room wouldn't be private anymore, not with hallway cameras tracking when I came and went. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, my only real friend at school. "Haven't seen you in forever. Want to hang out this weekend?" I stared at it, a painful lump forming in my throat. The Whitakers had cut me off from everyone. Mason's strategic violence, the endless fake homework, the surveillance. There was no time, no space, no one left. That night, once the house fell silent, I crept into the bathroom and locked the door. I pulled out my phone and set the timer. In the mirror, I carefully documented every bruise, every fingerprint Mason had left behind. The flash illuminated the ugly truth. Purple rings around my arms, raw welts across my ribs. I created a folder on my phone and labeled it Mason's Achievement Awards. If they found it, they'd assume it was academic stuff. The irony was bitter. The bathroom doorknob rattled suddenly. I killed the screen, flushed the toilet, and turned on the sink for cover. Mason stood outside when I opened the door. His eyes were sharp, predatory. "What were you doing in there so long?" "I used the bathroom," I said flatly, trying to move past him. He shoved me into the wall, his forearm pressing hard across my throat. "I know you're planning something, foster boy. I can smell it." I stared him down, refusing to flinch. "I'm not planning anything." He held my gaze for a moment longer, then backed off. "Good, because if you try anything, you'll wish you were back in that group home getting passed around like leftovers." The next morning, over scrambled eggs, Mrs. Whitaker dropped another bomb. "Guess what?" she chirped. "I've volunteered as a parent liaison at your school." She beamed at me like it was good news. "I'll be there every day, helping out in the office, attending classes. Isn't that wonderful?" My stomach twisted. School, my last shred of safety, was now hers too. She'd be there, watching me, policing me. During study hall, while she was distracted chatting with another parent volunteer, I snatched the family iPad from the counter. I opened the Messages app and scrolled through old threads. There it was. Messages from someone named James, dated 6 months ago. "Please help me. I can't take it anymore. Mason broke my ribs this time. I'm scared." The messages stopped abruptly. The last one read, "Please don't let them hurt me anymore." James, the previous foster kid, the one they said Mason had accidentally injured. But these messages told a much darker story. Later in chemistry, Mason slipped me a note with answers to his test. They were all wrong, on purpose. He wanted me to correct them one by one, while the teacher was watching, like we were working together naturally. As I revised each answer, I could feel the teacher's eyes boring into me. And as if that wasn't enough, Mrs. Whitaker had scheduled a parent-teacher conference during my library period, my only unsupervised time at school. Now I'd have to sit through it, listening to her bask in praise over my academic work, credited to Mason. Desperate, I tried again with the school counselor, choosing my words with surgical care. "I'm worried about a friend. They're in a really bad situation at home." Mrs. Patterson leaned back slowly in her chair. "What kind of situation?" Mrs. Patterson asked gently. "Their family expects things from them, makes them do things they're not comfortable with." Her expression hardened slightly. Are you talking about the Whitakers? Because they're pillars of this community. They've saved so many foster children, donated thousands to our programs. She gave a patronizing smile. Whatever you think you're seeing, I'm sure you're just misunderstanding. Dead end. Another locked door, but I wasn't giving up. During Mason's next test, I snapped quick photos of his real answers before swapping our papers. F after F, mistake after mistake. I was building my case. Evidence. While cleaning Mrs. Whitaker's home office, part of my assigned chores, I found a folder labeled Foster Care. Inside were documents confirming they received $800 a month for housing me. But there was more. Applications for other foster kids with handwritten notes in the margins. Honor roll student, high academic potential, similar appearance to Mason. They'd done this before, and they were planning to do it again. On Sunday dinner with Mason's grandparents, I sat through their praise and fawning. "We always knew Mason had it in him," his grandmother cooed, patting his hand. "Such a bright young man." When no one was looking, she slipped me a $20. "For all your hard work," she whispered. That's when I knew she was aware. Maybe not the full extent of it, but enough. Enough to be complicit. The pattern was obvious now. The Whitakers were hand-picking foster kids, kids like me, like James, who could do the academic heavy lifting while Mason got the credit. Vulnerable kids, kids with no one. After school one day, Sarah, Mason's ex-girlfriend, approached me near the bike racks. "It's weird," she said. "Mason used to be, well, kind of dumb when we were dating, could barely text without spelling something wrong. Then all of a sudden he's writing these killer essays?" I chose my words carefully. "People change." "Not that much," she said, flatly. "I still have his old texts. He couldn't even spell definitely. Now he's using words like ubiquitous in casual conversation." That lit something in her. A recognition. "He still can't explain his essays," she added. "I asked him what the symbolism meant in his Mockingbird paper, and he just stared at me." Mason must have seen us talking, so that afternoon in the locker room, he cornered me. His fists found all the places that wouldn't bruise visibly. Rib cage, sides, thighs, precise, cruel. "Stay away from Sarah, or next time's worse," he hissed. That night at dinner, Mr. Whitaker made a casual remark over mashed potatoes. "Shame about Sarah's dad. Heard he lost that contract with our company. These things happen in business." He didn't even look at me. Message received. Cross them, and they'd destroy your whole family. Then came a new punishment. Mrs. Whitaker started making me attend Mason's social events as his tutor. The first was a pool party at his friend's house. I sat in a folding chair with textbooks while Mason splashed around in the pool, collecting praise for his academic comeback. Mrs. Whitaker introduced me to other parents like I was a stray dog they'd rescued. "This is Nolan," she said with a pitying smile. "Our little charity case. We're just trying to help him catch up." The shame burned hotter than any bruise. I understood then that it wasn't just about using me. It was about breaking me, humiliating me till I was grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. That night, I started a new journal. I hollowed out an old jacket in my closet and hid it in the lining. Every instance of forced tutoring, every social event, every strategic placement of me as Mason's inferior went into those pages. 3 days later, something unexpected happened. Marcus showed up. I was sitting in the living room, buried under Mason's homework when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Whitaker answered it and froze for half a second when she saw who it was. Marcus stepped inside, polite but firm. He spotted me instantly. His eyes took in the scene. Me surrounded by Mason's assignments, cameras in every corner, the way I instinctively flinched when Mrs. Whitaker moved too quickly. He mouthed something at me. I didn't catch it first. Then I read his lips. The profanity was unmistakable even without sound. He'd seen it. Seen me. The fear I didn't even realize I still wore. Mrs. Whitaker recovered fast. Her smile snapped back into place. She offered Marcus cookies, asked about his family, complimented his sneakers. But while she walked him toward the kitchen, I slid a folded note into his hoodie pocket. 4 words, scrawled in desperation. "Help me. Please don't leave." Marcus palmed it like a magician, his face unreadable. He stayed exactly 15 minutes, making small talk.
I sweated through Mason's calculus homework late into the night. Before leaving, he stopped behind me and squeezed my shoulder. Firm, calculated. Message received. The next morning at school, I created a backup email account on a library computer. The Whitakers monitored my usual accounts, but they didn't know about this one. I began forwarding myself photos, time-stamped and labeled, slowly building my case. At lunch, I found a payphone near the gym that still worked. My hands shook as I punched in the number for child services. Hold music played. And played. 30 minutes passed, 30 minutes of watching the sidewalk expecting Mrs. Whitaker to appear out of thin air. Finally, I hung up, teeth clenched in frustration. The system meant to protect kids like me was drowning, overworked, understaffed, useless. That afternoon, Marcus started texting me, but in code. We pretended we were talking about a video game that didn't exist. Need backup in this level? Meant, are you safe? Boss fight tonight? Meant things are getting worse. Found a cheat code? Meant I've got something useful. That same day, behind the school near the dumpsters, I found Mason's college application essays, thrown out carelessly. My handwriting, my ideas. Harvard, Yale, Princeton. He was aiming for the Ivy League on my intelligence. I snapped photos of every page before Mason rounded the corner and silently lit them on fire, watching me the whole time to make sure I hadn't saved a copy. After school, Sarah found me. Her older sister Catherine stood with her, early 20s, eyes worn, expression sharp. Catherine said she'd gone to school with James, the previous foster kid. The Whitakers had told everyone James was returned to the system for violent behavior. But Catherine knew the truth. James had run away, terrified. He was now living in a shelter 2 towns over, still looking over his shoulder. That night at dinner, I carefully mentioned James, just his name, and studied their reactions. Mr. Whitaker's jaw locked. Mrs. Whitaker's smile went glassy and stiff. Mason just smirked. Mr. Whitaker set his fork down deliberately, his tone calm, rehearsed. "Some children just can't be helped," he said. "Too damaged, too unstable. We tried with James. He was ungrateful." The lies flowed easily. Mrs. Whitaker nodded, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Mason leaned back with the confidence of someone who thought he'd already won. The SAT loomed 2 weeks away. Federal crime, real consequences. The thought made my hands tremble as I cleared the table. Mrs. Whitaker noticed. She reached out to pat my shoulder. Her touch made my skin crawl. With Catherine's help, I tracked down James. We met at a McDonald's halfway between towns. He looked smaller than I expected. Slouched, pale, fingers wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. He flinched every time the door opened. His hands shook as he told me everything. The Whitakers had done the exact same thing to him. Test swapping, grade fraud, strategic manipulation. But when he refused to take Mason's SAT, they threatened to report him as violent to every foster agency in the state. A black mark like that meant no one would take him in. He'd age out alone, homeless. So he ran, left everything behind. The broken arm Mason had once bragged about, James pulled out X-rays from his backpack, multiple fractures, long healing time. Mason had used a baseball bat. Back at school, the cracks in Mason's act started showing. Teachers began noticing. Miss Chandler asked him to explain the symbolism in an essay he wrote. Mason blanked, muttered something about needing to look at his notes. The math teacher watched him fumble through a basic algebra problem on the board. The history teacher noticed he couldn't explain the core themes of any paper he turned in. Whispers spread, eyebrows raised, questions surfaced. Then the Whitakers made their next move. At a family meeting, they laid out their offer. Keep helping Mason through college, and they'll pay for my tuition too. Any school I wanted, all expenses covered. All I had to do was keep being Mason's mind. I saw it clearly. 4 more years of servitude. 4 more years of pain. 4 more years of Mason walking across graduation stages with my words in his mouth. But teachers were beginning to talk. In the faculty lounge, Miss Chandler remembered similar writing styles from another student, years ago. The math teacher recalled a bright foster kid who mysteriously disappeared. A pattern was forming. Mrs. Whitaker's carefully constructed image began to splinter. When confronted about the
mounting suspicions at a parent-teacher conference, in the parking lot afterward, Mrs. Whitaker lost control. She snapped at me, venom dripping from her voice, before catching herself. The mask slipped for just a second, long enough. In Mr. Whitaker's home office, I found more damning evidence. Tax forms showing they claimed me as a dependent while pocketing foster care stipends. Educational expenses listed that were never spent on me. Years of financial fraud, all in their own handwriting. Miss Chandler pulled me aside after class. She knew. She'd started keeping duplicate records of all student work, quietly noting the identical writing style between Mason's essays and papers from previous years. She didn't have enough yet to act, but she was building her own case. Meanwhile, Marcus created a cloud storage account from home, sharing access through a game app the Whitakers didn't monitor. When I logged in, I almost dropped the phone. He'd already uploaded gigabytes of data, photos, files, recordings, everything I'd smuggled out on USB drives hidden in my shoes. Sarah joined us despite her dad's previous warnings. She'd looked into the supposed business contract loss and found the truth. A competitor had simply outbid her father. The timing was a coincidence the Whitakers weaponized. They didn't have the power they claimed. We formed a tight circle. Me, Marcus, Sarah, and Catherine, meeting in secret at Marcus's house. The evidence was solid, but we only had one shot to make it count. Sarah floated the idea of planting fake documents, something to force immediate action, but I refused. We didn't need lies. The truth was enough, and we'd do it right, clean, no shortcuts. During a heated family argument about college applications, Mason slipped. He complained about not understanding his essay, then clamped his mouth shut, realizing what he'd said. His parents' faces changed, fear behind their practiced expressions. I recorded the whole thing on my phone, tucked under the table. James agreed to provide a sworn statement, despite the lingering terror in his eyes. His hands trembled as he wrote it all down: dates, abuse, threats, the forced tests, a pattern stretching back years. Then came the cafeteria incident. Mason's girlfriend dumped him, loudly, in front of everyone. "You're not smart," she shouted. "You've been faking it." The words hit like a grenade. Whispers erupted. Social media exploded. A local hashtag calling out the scam began to trend. Students shared stories, screenshots, suspicions. The Whitakers' flawless image was crumbling. Marcus's older brother, a law student, reviewed everything we had. His verdict was multiple felonies, fraud, abuse, tax evasion. He couldn't believe how careless they'd been. Their paper trail stretched miles. Then, finally, Mrs. Whitaker broke. She cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low and sharp and venomous. The real her, ugly, raw, snapped through for a moment. Then she caught herself, smoothing it over with that fake sugary smile. But I'd seen behind it now, and so had others. Teachers who once sang their praises started backing away. Miss Chandler apologized, said she should have noticed what happened with James but didn't have proof. Now she did. The Whitakers started slipping. They missed my backup phone. They overlooked my evidence gathering. Their system, once tight and ruthless, was coming apart under pressure. Then Catherine brought the final piece. James hadn't just been beaten, he'd been forced into the exact same academic scam. She had old Whitaker documents, foster profiles, handwritten notes, targets for manipulation. This wasn't a one-time scheme, or even a two-time one. This was a system. And I made sure Mason's younger cousins weren't pulled into it next. At tense family dinners, I distracted them with games, jokes, stories, anything to keep them innocent. Whatever happened next, no more kids would be sacrificed. Miss Chandler, the previously dismissive school counselor, and 3 more teachers formed an unofficial watch group. They made sure I was never alone with Mason and started documenting everything. Mrs. Whitaker tried one last charm offensive. She showed up at Marcus's house with a pie and forced compliments, smiling like nothing was wrong. But Marcus had already told his parents everything. They were polite, but cold. They didn't buy a word of it. Then, one afternoon, Mason's grandparents dropped in unexpectedly. He was struggling with basic algebra. Without thinking, I started explaining the equation. And that's when I saw it. His grandmother's face changed, slowly, then all at once. She was putting the pieces together.
The parent network started buzzing. Something was off about the Whitaker family. People began asking questions. Why didn't Mason ever study with friends? Why couldn't he carry his weight in group projects? Why did his spoken explanations never match the complexity of his written work? During a computer lab period, I logged into our shared cloud account using Marcus's credentials. Everything we'd gathered was there. Photos, timestamps, documents, audio clips, all compiled into one airtight file. Ready. The SAT was 48 hours away. Decision time. Take the test and commit federal fraud, or bring the entire truth into the light. The testing center, where Mrs. Whitaker's understanding friend worked, expected me to show up as Mason. During a staged family photo shoot for Mason's college application portfolio, the photographer noticed my bruises. He watched the way I recoiled when Mason moved too quickly. He didn't say anything, but his silence said enough. Reality hit like a brick. If I exposed them, I'd lose any chance at college. No scholarship, no financial support, just another forgotten foster kid aging out of the system. But to continue meant sacrificing my soul, trading 4 years of freedom for 4 more years in chains. Then came the school assembly. Topic: academic integrity. When the question period opened, I stood. My voice echoed through the auditorium. What happens when someone takes the SAT for someone else? Is that still just cheating, or is it a crime? Silence. Mason paled in his seat. The principal turned sharply, eyes flicking between Mason and I. A charge rippled through the air. After that, the questions poured in. Parents, students, teachers, wondering why Mason never studied with anyone, why he couldn't explain ideas from his so-called essays, why his in-class work didn't reflect his GPA. The pattern could no longer be ignored. The Whitakers' pristine reputation began to crumble under the weight of undeniable evidence. Mrs. Whitaker made one last frantic attempt to destroy everything, but she was too late. I'd hidden backups everywhere. On USB drives tucked into her own jewelry box, school computer files, multiple cloud accounts. She taught me to be meticulous, I learned quickly. The Whitakers tried to kick me out, calling it emergency removal, claimed I was unstable, violent, a threat to their family. But it was already too late. I had arranged to move in with Marcus's family. Paperwork filed, legal, final. They couldn't touch me. When Mr. Whitaker lunged to physically stop me from leaving, Marcus's dad stepped between us. His presence alone was enough to make Mr. Whitaker freeze. Other parents had arrived by then, observing, watching. Witnesses surrounded us. Their carefully crafted illusions shattered like glass. Every lie, every manipulation, exposed. Then Mason cracked. His grandparents had shown up unannounced again, this time with hard questions about his college applications. They asked him to explain the themes in one of his essays. Mason's face went blank. His grandmother pulled out a printed copy, pointing to specific lines. "What did you mean here, Mason?" she asked. He stammered, floundered, couldn't explain a single sentence. Her eyes moved slowly between Mason and me, realization dawning. She folded the essay and slipped it into her purse. His grandfather's jaw clenched as he watched his grandson fumble over basic questions about his own supposed writing. That night, Mason stormed into my room. The arrogance was gone, replaced with panic. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me hard. "You have to fix this! You have to fix this!" His grip left new bruises, but I saw the cracks in his armor. Mrs. Whitaker appeared in the doorway. She pulled him back, smile plastered in place, for the grandparents downstairs. The next morning, an emergency family meeting was called. I poured coffee, playing the dutiful child one last time. Across from the Whitakers, Mason's grandparents sat stiffly. The grandfather opened a folder. Inside, years of Mason's elementary school work, assignments collected during school visits. The handwriting, the thought process, the clarity, it didn't match anything Mason had submitted in the past year. Mrs. Whitaker launched into damage control, spoke of late bloomers, advanced tutoring, miraculous breakthroughs. But then the grandfather slid a paper across the table. "Explain this," he said to Mason. "Just a simple algebra problem." Mason stared at it, silent.
The truth became undeniable. Mason threw his pencil down and finally cracked, his voice rising in frustration as he admitted he hadn't written a single essay or taken a single test. The confession tumbled out in angry, blame-filled bursts, pointing fingers at everyone but himself. His grandparents sat frozen in horror as Mason revealed the full scope: the test swapping, the fraud, the abuse used to keep the lie alive. He even brought up James, describing the baseball bat incident with a twisted sense of pride. His grandmother raised a trembling hand to her mouth as years of deception hit her all at once. Then came the final blow. Mason's grandfather opened his briefcase and pulled out a set of financial records, bank statements showing regular deposits from the Whitakers, supposedly for Mason's tutoring. But now it was clear. They had unknowingly funded the exploitation. His hands shook as he laid the documents across the table, silently calculating how much of their money had helped fuel the abuse. That was when Mrs. Whitaker finally snapped. Her mask cracked open completely as she screamed at Mason, blaming him for everything. "For being too stupid to keep it together," she spat, her voice shrill with fury. Mr. Whitaker tried to calm her down, reaching for her arm, but she shoved him away with a violent jerk. The facade they'd built over years disintegrated in a matter of minutes. Mason's grandmother stood up. "We're cutting off all financial support immediately." She tore up documents tied to Mason's trust fund right there at the kitchen table. The shredded pieces fluttered like snow. His grandfather added they'd be contacting their lawyer to recover the money already given. Child Services arrived just hours later, called by the grandparents themselves. Caseworkers interviewed me separately, photographed my bruises, documented everything. Thankfully, Marcus's family had already submitted emergency placement paperwork. With the Whitakers' own relatives supporting my removal, they had no way to stop it. The school board launched an immediate investigation into Mason's academic record. Parent complaints had reached a tipping point. Teachers began turning in the evidence they'd collected quietly over time. Miss Chandler submitted her documentation, highlighting similarities in writing across multiple years and foster children. The community responded fast and ruthlessly. Parents pulled their kids out of any study groups hosted by the Whitakers. Neighbors whispered in store aisles. Even the church the Whitakers once commanded with influence and smiles gently suggested they find another congregation. Mr. Whitaker tried one last manipulation. He created a social media campaign painting me as a deeply troubled teen who had corrupted their innocent son. He posted carefully edited clips, moments where I appeared aggressive or unstable, a breakfast confrontation framed as unprovoked rage. Marcus responded instantly. He posted the full context for every manipulated clip. Security camera footage, their own footage, showed Mason attacking me right before each so-called outburst. The backlash was swift and brutal. Comments poured in from former foster kids who'd lived with the Whitakers, sharing eerily similar stories. Local parenting groups on Facebook lit up with discussion. Screenshots of Mason's old posts, filled with spelling errors and grammatical mistakes, went viral, compared to the polished essays he claimed to have written. Parents who once admired Mason's miraculous turnaround now recounted stories of him being unable to help with their kids' homework. At the school board meeting, an overflow crowd filled the auditorium. Parents demanded accountability. Teachers testified about years of suspicion, about the pressure to stay silent. The Whitakers sat in the back row, their once commanding presence reduced to a hushed shadow. Even those who had long defended them, citing their volunteer work, their church ties, began to withdraw as the full picture came into focus. The family who once ruled the PTA and school events had become outcasts. Foster care investigators interviewed James via video call. His testimony, combined with medical records and my evidence, revealed a clear, repeated pattern of exploitation. Other former foster children stepped forward, sharing similar experiences. The Whitakers' foster care license was revoked immediately. Their own relatives, Mason's grandparents, hired forensic accountants to investigate the fraud. Tax records spanning years showed them claiming educational expenses they never spent, siphoning foster care payments for personal gain. Soon the IRS came knocking, an audit was launched, and the threads of their carefully maintained finances began to unravel. One by one, Mason's college acceptances were rescinded. Admissions officers cited inconsistencies, suspicious documentation, and formal complaints. Word of the fraud spread fast through college admissions offices. Harvard's rejection came first, then Yale, then Princeton. Each thin envelope chipped away at Mason's carefully stolen dream of prestige. With pressure from the community and a growing mountain of evidence, the Whitakers had no choice. Rather than endure a public foster care trial, which would expose everything as public record, they agreed to sign over legal guardianship to Marcus's family. Moving day came fast. I packed the few things I owned. The Whitakers barely looked at me. Mason tried one last time to intimidate me, but his grandparents were there. His grandfather didn't hesitate to step between us when Mason moved in too close. Marcus's family welcomed me like I was already theirs. A real bedroom waited for me, not a corner, not a cot, but a space that was mine. That first night I slept deeply. No cameras watching me, no late-night footsteps, no flinching at the sound of morning doors. Within a month, the Whitakers listed their house. They couldn't go to the store without being judged. Former friends crossed streets to avoid them. Parents demanded their children be pulled from the Whitakers' classrooms. Their jobs in education became unsustainable. Mrs. Whitaker made one last move, filed a complaint accusing me of theft. But the bank records were clear. They'd stolen from me for years, pocketing foster care payments while providing no support. The complaint was thrown out, one more layer of disgrace. They left town quietly in the middle of the night, relocating several states away. Their new forwarding address led to a cramped apartment, no cul-de-sac, no luxury cars. Mason's car was sold to cover moving costs. The family that once built their world on image was left with nothing but the truth. The school board took action. New policies were implemented for monitoring academic performance. Teachers received training on how to spot exploitation, especially of foster kids. My story became a cautionary tale, but also a catalyst for change. Scholarship offers began arriving. Schools that had followed the case reached out, offering aid to a student who had shown unshakable resilience. Miss Chandler wrote my recommendation letters, the ones that told my story, not Mason's. James and I kept in contact. He'd found stable housing, was working toward his GED. Together, we began helping other foster kids learn the signs of academic exploitation. Our pain had purpose now. Marcus's family gave me what I'd never had: stability. Family dinners meant laughter, not interrogations. Homework was mine. Achievements were mine. They cheered when my acceptance letters came in, every one of them. 6 months after leaving the Whitakers, I stood on a stage wearing graduation robes as valedictorian. My speech focused on resilience, on self-worth. I spoke about systems that fail the vulnerable and about communities that look away until it's too late. In the audience were the people who had truly shown up for me: Marcus and his parents, Sarah and Catherine, Miss Chandler, the teachers who had finally listened. Even Mason's grandparents came. Their presence was a quiet apology, their way of showing they knew now. Meanwhile, the Whitakers struggled in their new city. No reputation, no network, just another family trying to survive. Mason worked a minimum wage job, his shortcut to success gone. Their obsession with image left them empty once the mask cracked. But my mind, once stolen, was now my own. It became my ticket to freedom. Full scholarships, research grants, a future built entirely on my merit. The intelligence they tried to claim now carved a path I'd never dreamed possible. The foster care system, while still imperfect, improved. New oversight, better training. Fewer kids would suffer like James and I had. Mason's grandparents created a scholarship fund for foster youth pursuing higher education. Their guilt became action. They asked me to help select recipients, to make sure the money went to those who truly earned it. I chose a college far from that town, but I carried the lessons with me. That trust once shattered could be rebuilt, slowly, patiently, through care that didn't ask for anything in return. And therapy helped with the rest, processing trauma that ran deeper than words, grief for years lost, and anger I had once thought would never leave. But there was peace, too, a quiet strength that had grown through surviving it all, and the unshakable knowledge that I had made it out, not just alive, but whole.
The bruises faded, but the impact of my story did not. It spread quietly through foster care networks, not as gossip, but as guidance. Social workers began using it in training sessions. Foster kids heard about it and learned to document abuse, to find allies, to recognize the signs. What the Whitakers did to me became a cautionary blueprint, an example of what to watch for, and more importantly, how to escape. Mason tried to contact me once. He sent a long, rambling message, accusing me of ruining his life. I didn't reply. His refusal to take responsibility showed me everything I needed to know. He hadn't changed, hadn't grown. The Whitakers had created someone who believed he was entitled to success without effort. Now he had to face the world without their protection. I graduated summa cum laude. Every achievement, every honor was mine. Walking across that stage felt different when the diploma bore my name, earned with my work. No one could take it from me. Not anymore.